Assalamu alaikum. I'm Nicole, Managing Editor of Western New York Muslims.
And I'm Fatima and Nicole, Executive Director. Welcome to our show today.
Today is an important show. We're reflecting on the anniversary that is approaching of 9/11. We have went out to the community and got reflections on how 9/11 has affected them. Many of us remember that day vividly.
Yeah, Nicole, do you remember that day?
Yes, I do. I remember I was in 8th grade and our teacher had told us about the Twin Towers being hit by the airplanes.
What was your reaction? How did you guys react?
Oh, we were very scared. We were trying to talk about it, but our teacher, study hall, kept quieting us. But we thought that we're going to be waging this war soon, and we were very fearful. And I didn't know until years later that this was a war that wouldn't be fought on U.S. soil, but overseas. So it was a time that I was really ignorant to what this terrorism was.
Yeah, when you're that young, you don't really realize what's happening. Even me, I was about 13 years old when it happened, and I was waking up to go to school. I was in 8th grade, and I went to the kitchen and I saw my dad listening to the radio, and usually he's checking his stocks at that time. So I was asking him, what are you doing, Dad? And then that's when he told me that, what was occurring in New York City and in Washington, D.C. And, at that age, like I said, you don't really realize what's going on, and you don't realize, the consequences of it. But later on in life, I realized the effects.
Yeah, the effects have been very profound. So we went out to the community and have short clips of reactions from community members reflecting on that day, so how it has affected their life, how has it affected the world, and what 9/11 should be remembered as.
There will also be additional footage available online at www.wnmuslims.org, but for now, here are some clips that we gathered from community members.
See, 10 years ago, I was in high school.
I remember being in elementary school. I think it was about 5th grade when it actually happened for me.
I was in Mumbai, India.
I worked 3 blocks away from Ground Zero, and I happened to be in Albany, New York at the time, and I actually saw it on TV, and we immediately left. And I remember that I had to cross a bridge that allowed me to see a view of the area. And I was just amazed at the amount of devastation and smoke. the darkness of that smoke and the sadness that it immediately provoked when I saw it.
I was coming out from a neighbor who gave haircuts, and well, everyone has that story. How it's changed, you know, it got me to think about people and the unfortunate radicalism and terrorism that does go on in the world.
Buildings go down with all those people in it, plus a lot of people that tried to save them. I was really almost devastated by that, since I thought back immediately to Pearl Harbor.
Well, 9/11 is one of those events where we all remember where we were and what we were doing when it happened. It's hard to believe that 10 years have passed.
A very large change in the way that the American public and the American media responds to certain issues after 9/11.
I think it's also really provoked a lot of ignorance in people and just formed a lot of hatred because people really don't know where to put their anger, so they end up misplacing it or projecting it onto people who are completely unrelated to the tragedies.
I have been in the United States since I was 12 years old. I have never felt out of place until 9/11. That was the day that has changed my life.
For me, it's been a constant reminder, as a Muslim in particular, a constant reminder to practice this faith and to practice it as it should be, and to focus on its essential principles of peace and goodwill towards people. And every year that 9/11 comes around, I'm always reminded of
And
that.
I just remember everything getting quiet and radios and everything turning on. I mean, you think when you're young, you don't really pay attention to things. And I mean, you know something's wrong, but it's kind of like you don't feed into it that much. Over the years growing up, you know, through high school and now in college, you know, you see a lot of difference as you walk around. Paranoia between people, Arabs, etc. You know, it's a lot of, you know, kind of like segregation, you know, when it comes to people from Pakistan and Afghanistan now.
They made reference to turbans and racial slurs that about bin Laden, and you know, they're your cousins of his. It just there were a lot of incidents that I mean, there's so many incidents that happened that these kids felt.
In a way, we had to change our fashion and how I was raised over here, and then I had to make a point that this is what I had to pretty much, you know, defend my religion. Before that, freedom of religion was prized in this country, but now it's under attack.
In terms of how we view people, I think that changes your perspective, unfortunately, because I think people are basically very, very good, and we don't ever really get that. So kind of stop watching TV and things like that. It's horrible, you know, just sensationalizing negativity.
It's changed the world in so many ways. In some ways, it's brought people together and forced people to have conversations that weren't happening before, brought different communities together in certain ways. But at the same time, it's also been a very polarizing event, and it has moved people further and further away and caused levels of distrust and concern between communities that still need to be addressed even 10 years on, in some ways even more now than 10 years ago.
They were like, you look what you've done to our country, and it was like, what did I do to your country? And they roll their eyes, and I was like, it's not my fault. There's some bad people in each religion. So then I just walk away from them.
Unfortunately, the crime itself gets mixed up with the religious and ethnic backgrounds of the person rather than separating out the act itself.
I think everybody feels a little more vulnerable. It doesn't matter where you're at. Every part of the world has felt the reverberating effects of terrorism.
And I think that like 9/11 was like one of those times when suddenly the world became like a relevant thing to me.
I always felt like I was an American. 9/11, the day after 9/11, I felt alienated, I felt lonely, I cried, I just felt terrible.
It's really difficult to to remember how things were before, in a way. And whenever I do remember before, it kind of surprises me.
But in a sense, whereas people who are more independent-minded, we understand that everybody has their own values, and everything happens for a reason. There's a reason that 9/11 happened. It's a reason that people woke up and decided to attack the United States. And people who are independent-minded, we have our own thoughts on it, and we're not dictated by what other people instill in us, that all Arabs are bad, Muslims are bad.
Well, one time I was selling hats for a fundraiser at school, and this boy Jackson, he comes up and asks for a refund or a return. No returns were allowed, so I told him no, and he accused me of committing 9/11.
These people are different from us, mistreat them, because in reality, they're all in the United States just as well as they're outside of the United States. So, and they work just as hard as we do.
Yes, actually, on 9/11, before 9/11, I didn't wear my hijab. And after 9/11, I felt the need to wear my hijab. And then once I did wear it, I felt people looked at me differently. They didn't know why I wore it. I felt like I needed to wear it for protection.
Because it's made me really realize my mortality and just how vulnerable we are as human beings.
They were either afraid of some unknown fear. So I see this in an environment of fear that has developed after 9/11.
But it should also be sort of contextualized historically as one of a series of events. Like, it obviously was not the first terrorist attack that took place in the United States.
What Muslim people are practicing in their beliefs, that that it has nothing to do with 9/11 and very, very far from being anything violent. It's exactly the complete opposite.
It's terrorist-filled religion, just hatred towards it, and they don't know nothing about it, So, after that, after 9/11, it just changed Islam. It changed the way of views on people. Islam is not that way, It's a beautiful religion, and you shouldn't just listen to what people say about it, and don't believe all the hype.
But I'd say that to them, that this is what Islam means. Islam means give life, not take life.
So there's been this kind of opening, this kind of explosion of questions and inquiry on the one hand, and then on the other hand, it's been very difficult for Muslims, for many Muslims to travel, to maintain aspects of their faith and feel safe. I am from Tennessee, which is one of the places where there's a lot of debate, even about the right of Muslims to practice their faith, or even to build masjids, build mosques. So those things are all a part of and are a legacy of 9/11.
And now sometimes I wonder if what people say to me is really the truth.
Underpinning fear in the environment and the culture is eroding us as a nation and as a country, and we must overcome this with our confidence and our values.
I think it starts by coming to grips with the fact that we are all different for a reason.
It should not be remembered as an event Muslims did, because not everybody did that. And there are bad people in every religion.
World focus that should have been freedom has become security, and security and freedom are always competing in a state nation.
As our soldiers come home from a war that we didn't endorse, I think that we should help them more, and I think that kind of has changed our perspective on things. What are we fighting for exactly? And it's like just invisible, like the seen and the unseen. It's just invisible. And what is the purpose of it?
Unfortunately, that's not the way our Lord wanted us to feel. We were supposed to trust our brothers and sisters. And I feel many people are segregated now more than before.
The United States of America has certain values. It has a constitution, freedom of expression, freedom of gathering, freedom of political views and organizing things. And those freedoms are the basic values that we have this country for.
It's not just Arabs or people from Pakistan that are Muslim. It means people from, the islands, Africa, etc. They're all, a lot of them are Muslim. A lot of African Americans are Muslim. So, it's really, I know a lot of people that's Muslim, and they're normal just like I am. I don't look at them because, people, from Iraq and Afghanistan attacked the United States, so you're a part of them, because they have their own mindset just like those people did.
there's no justification for almost 1 billion people always having to be defensive, having to defend their faith. Muslims themselves view themselves as changed around the world. So I would say the world is worse, obviously, since 9/11, not just because of the loss of lives, but just because of how such a large faith and its image has changed negatively, which is completely unfair.
The vast majority of that fear and that concern and that trepidation is coming from places of ignorance and lack of information. And the truth of the matter is that Muslims have been in this country and live in this country and operate in this country and always have. That didn't change in 9/11. It's not as if there's been this new explosion of Muslims. We've been in and around and loving and living with Muslims all the time. It's a part of the fabric of this society that we have these kind of close and intimate interactions with people all of different faiths and religions and what have you. And the more we know about that and the more we acknowledge those kind of interconnections between people, I think can only do good for debates that you find in New York City, for example, or in Tennessee or elsewhere.
And so I think we're all a bit more conscious of the need to not only feel more safe, but to spur more dialogue. I think what we can do to remedy some of these very harsh feelings that are harbored toward the U.S., that is the United States of America, is to have a more cordial dialogue, a fruitful dialogue that is in fact mindful of the need for us to be more peaceful.
In the Middle East now, the freedom is winning and the security is not a high priority. But in America, the reverse is true, and this trend is very dangerous. I think this place could be a living hell if another 9/11 happens. So it's in my best interest and best interest of all the Muslims living in the United States, as well as other Western world countries, that nothing like 9/11 ever happen again.
I mean, even simple things like just going to the airport and picking somebody up.
Heighten our need to feel safe in the world. I can remember that previous to 9/11, there were so many things that were different and so many leisures that we took that we just can't take anymore because of that need that we feel to be safe.
It should wake us up, and we should move on. And we should move on with our values. And our values are what? Freedom. Security is a byproduct of freedom. Freedom is not a byproduct of security. I wish the media would present a more balanced view of what happens around the world. The media has just blown our faith out of such a proportion in a negative way that one almost, I'm embarrassed to say this, but tries to distance oneself from even sharing the fact that I am a Muslim, and I'm embarrassed to say that.
Every time we think it is diminishing, the media finds a way of making people remember 9/11 in a negative way and remember all the Muslims in a negative way.
I get sad, but then I just get over it because I know that their thoughts don't matter to me.
I think sometimes forgetting and forgiving is the only way you could let it pass.
9/11 should be remembered as a day when a nation's confidence in itself was challenged by their attack. And we have to, and we are going to tell the people that our confidence is intact, our confidence in our values. We must not start redefining our values. We have to stick with who we are. And it should be remembered as a tribute to those who were targeted because they belong to a free country.
Definitely not the first terrorist attack that's taken place anywhere in the world. And one of the things that I think people sometimes remember, especially when they memorialize 9/11, is this is not a phenomenon that is unique to the United States, and that people live with this reality.
You'll always have some sort of enemy, and you'll always have somebody who feels that you're not a superpower or you're not better than they are. And people must realize that as the United States, yes, we are a superpower, etc., but that doesn't mean that we're taken out of the fact that we can still be attacked and that people can still disagree with us.
Well, I certainly hope that at some point we can remember it as a turning point where people started to do things differently and started to do things better, that we started to learn about each other and focus on our kind of interconnections and the ways in which we're dependent on each other. If at some point we can look back at that time and know that we started to learn about each other and to do things for and with each other at that time in ways that didn't happen before, maybe some kind of good can come out of it.
9/11 should also be looked at as a victory to us, that Americans came together and united against a common foe. And we put aside our differences and stood up as Americans, not as Muslims, not as Christians, not as Jews, not as agnostics, but we stood up together as Americans and stood together and said, this is our country and we're going to defend it.
And that's the biggest lesson, I think, out of 9/11 is that we have to find the good people on Earth, and there are many. We have to find the people in our communities that we can work together and get to know. And I know it's enriched my life, getting to know a whole new group of people that I never even imagined that I would get to know, and it's been wonderful.
The United States of America, I think, will be remembered as a nation that used this as an opportunity to try to re-establish what's important to us. And that means not only being a leader of the free world, but also being a leader as far as making our land, our nation, our land more secure.
We all should share love and understanding and not put people down. And by sharing what we feel in our hearts, we'll make a happier world.
How we respond to each other, other Americans, whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims, and also how we respond to the rest of the world in terms of violence and war and stuff like that, which I think we have a lot to learn from.
You know, like a wake-up call to us that we need to be aware that we're just one group of people among God's children, and we ought to care.
So it affects me, but in a sense it really doesn't affect me because it doesn't change who I speak to, how I act, how I treat anybody.
Well, I hope it will be a remember of opportunity for the goodness that God puts in all people to win out and get victory over an evil act. I hope that's what it would end up being.
The coming together of the entire nation as a single voice, one color, one religion, one voice, and one nationhood. There was no distinction of a white and a black, no distinction of any religious affiliation, no distinction of any language or ethnicity. We truly came together, one nation, under God, under one flag. And that's what I want to remember.
We want to thank all those participants, students and professionals who came out and took the time to give us their reflections on how 9/11 has affected them. Thank you.
Thank you. In 10 years since 9/11, a lot has happened. There's been the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, drone attacks in Pakistan and Afghanistan, increased security at airports, invasive full-body scanners, the death of Osama bin Laden, a decreased economy, and decreased tourism to the United States. And the list goes on. WNA Muslims as an organization believes that the only way to move forward will be to stop living in fear about what has happened in the past. As much as there has been negative attention surrounding Muslims and Islam, there has also been positive. It's important to focus on the positive and continue to move forward as Americans.
Those are very profound words. We'd like to thank everyone for viewing us today. Please log on to www.wnymuslims.org for more footage.
Thank you again, everybody, for participating in this show.
We are Western New York Muslims.
We use westernnewyorkmuslims.org to be connected.
For reviews on the latest restaurants and movies.
To use Western New York Muslims Classified to sell my old school books, DVDs, and old clothes.
To have a place to expose those who are intolerant of Islam and to commend those who portray it correctly.
To increase my deen or faith.
To learn more about the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
To find great information on Islamic scholarship funds.
To have open dialogue with Muslims and non-Muslims in the community.
For the prayer time.
To ask an imam important questions about my faith.
To learn about Islam.
To be updated on births, deaths, and marriages in the community.
To find great support groups that guide me as a new convert to Islam.
To be informed about the latest upcoming events in the community.
To find great local halal restaurants and food markets.
For helpful information for new residents of Western New York.
And to express yourself creatively with blogs, articles, pictures, any sort of multimedia you want.
If you wish to become a user to get connected to the community, then please register at www.wnymuslims.org.
Connecting communities through diversity,
awareness,
and service.
We hope this website is useful and encourages the community to stay together.